Hey, welcome to Fathering Our Future, the podcast for dads. I'm Anthony Vandergriff, and I am not the perfect dad, but every day I am trying to be better. I'm joined today by a great person and a great dad. His name is John Farris. John, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the episode. I'm confident that this is going to be helpful and inspirational to dads, myself included. And for all of those listening and watching, I asked John to be on the podcast because obviously adoption is kind of a hot topic across the nation right now. And John and his wife, in their lifestyle and their life in general, adoption and fostering has been a pretty big part of it all.
Yes, it has.
And so John's going to come on and share a little bit of his life, a little bit of his story and his journey, talk to us about fostering, adoption, and I'm looking forward to his answer on kind of the heart and mentality behind it all. I know it's going to be good. So anyway, without further ado, I've kind of let the cat out of the bag a little bit on telling everyone that you're a dad. But why don't you tell us how many kids you have?
You bet. So I'm the proud papa of 6 beautiful, amazing children.
Awesome.
Yeah,
6.
6.
So of the 6 that you have, because, we're talking about fostering to adopt here, how many biologically are yours?
So we have 3 biological children.
Okay.
And we have 3 adopted children.
Okay. And of the 3 adopted, were they all fostered to adopt?
No.
Okay.
No. We had 2 were, and
Okay.
one was just an amazing miracle. And,
Awesome.
And I would love to share that because it was just a phenomenal thing. But yeah, 2 were fostered to adopt, and one was just we were actually in the process of renewing our license to foster, and just an amazing thing happened.
Okay,
on that one.
cool.
So,
Well, I'll give you the opportunity closer to the end to tell that. That's great. All right, so let me ask you this question, and this might, no pressure if you don't know the exact number, but in total, how many children have you and your wife fostered?
that's a good question. I want to say probably in our time of doing it, maybe 15.
Wow.
My wife could probably correct me and slap me later and say, "Dude, where are you?
You forgot one."
What's wrong?" Right. She is definitely would be better to answer that. But it's been somewhere between 12 kids, 15
Wow.
kids, something like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is there a limit on how many you can foster?
At one time, there is.
Okay.
Like fostering a number of children based on the amount of beds, basically, you have in your home or
I see.
rooms. But you could be in foster for forever, and so the length of time, the number of children over the length of time.
So how long have you been doing it?
We did it after my third, Avery. We decided to do it. Now, there was a inspiration from her parents, my wife's parents, that they got into foster care, and we sort of were there firsthand to see. And it was after Avery that we decided. Actually, my wife had miscarried because she was pregnant with another child after Avery, and we just sat back and thought about what her parents were and seeing what her parents had gone through, and we decided to pursue the foster parent. So it was probably a year. No, I guess it was right after Avery. We decided to get licensed and pursue it. I think we did it even before that. I'm trying to remember the dates are running together, but we've been doing it since probably at least since Avery was born.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we're talking 15, 16 years?
At least 16, yeah, because
Wow.
Brenly's 16 in August. And
Wow.
For that, so
That's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, this is why I wanted you to be the person to talk about this. I didn't realize how long you'd been doing it, but this is fantastic. So let's start here. So as someone who's been doing this for so long as you have, for everyone else, and rather than just getting a Google definition of what this is, what does it really mean to foster a child?
Oh man, that's a good question. It's really it's a duty. It's an expression of applied faith. It's realizing there's a need out there in our community, and realizing we have been blessed with resources, blessed with a family, a home, and that sort of thing, and understanding that we have an opportunity to open our home up to. And again, there was some background we got to see from my wife's parents, what the children they would bring into their homes and the types of backgrounds those children went through.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got to see that firsthand. And we wanted to be an extension of that, is because we saw that there was absolute need for that type of service, that type of opening your home and allowing children that have never seen what it looks like on the side of a normal, quote unquote normal. I mean, we're about as normal as you can get, I guess. But what a normal family looks like, right? The sort of the nuclear family construct that's in our minds. These children have never seen that. A lot of them have never seen that. And so having had 3 children and we just felt like the time was good to open up. I always, my wife will tell you this, like I wanted 4 children, she wanted 2, and we ended up with 6. So the math somewhere got off there.
Yeah.
But you know, that 4th child, we just opened our home and felt like this was an opportunity for us to bring someone in to help. And we talked about a sort of a permanent adoption, but at the time we first started, we just said, look, let's do foster. Let's bring children in. Let's give them an opportunity. And when you're in the state system and you're a foster parent in that regard, you see a lot of stuff that you just do not want to see. The underbelly of humanity, probably at its worst. In certain cases. And I can tell you, there are children we've seen come into our home, not our home, but my wife's parents' home, that, I mean, beaten and bruised, and I could tell you some really horrific travesties that have come in, and just seeing, if it's a week, if it's a month, if it's 6 months, however long they're in your home, just the transformation of these kids, they see like, oh, there are people out there that love.
Gives them hope.
Exactly.
Sounds like.
So, and when you couple that with a faith in God, and you couple that with our belief system and who we believe the master is, they get to see that, okay, it's a beautiful home, it's a wonderful home, but they get a brush of God, so to speak, in a family, in a home that cherishes, putting the Lord first, and so they get a. Again, it could be a week, it could be 6 months, but they get to see that. It's a touch that they get to see that they wouldn't have otherwise.
So fostering is just essentially giving a kid an opportunity that hasn't had one.
That's the way we looked at it, right? I know I gave you a huge, long-winded answer, but that's exactly what it is. It's and for a lot of people that are unsure, because a lot of people go into this thinking, man, how will I react? And it sometimes, and look, this was me too. It's some folks will say, well, selfishly speaking, and it's there's somewhat some truth to that, but it is I mean, you're talking about a human being, and when you go into this and you say, hey, I want to help. What does that mean? How do I help? And I think fostering is a great way to do that, because you're unsure if you're ready to have a child. You're permanent. Mm-hmm. But opening up your home on a short-term basis to help, that's needed. That's a huge need out in our community.
Wow.
And it's a way for folks to assist and help without, if they're in that stage in life where they're unsure of I'm ready to really raise a child and bring a child in this world, and which is a huge decision. And look, I'll just tell you, there's no difference in that decision between biological children and foster children and adoptive children. The whole initial point is bringing a child and caring for a child and raising a child, whether they're biological or not biological, it's the same. It's the same decision point. It's the same result. I mean, there's differences, but you know what? I've got every one of my children, the 3 biological and the 3 non-biological, every one of them have different personalities and different ways about them and different things they think of. So it's not, it's the same decision point in my mind that people go into. So anyways, sorry, giving you a long-winded
this
answer
is great.
to that. But yeah, foster's probably more of a way to sort of get that sort of interim, sort of short-term assistance and provide that, which is huge. It is such a big impact on those kids' lives, for sure.
I mean, just the concept that you talked about. You take kids who come from probably some of the worst brokenness, and you show them that it's not always like that.
That's right.
It's not all that bad, and so they have something to look forward to. And I mean, hope is a huge player in life. Whenever you want to achieve anything, just getting the glimpse of, oh, this is what it could be. It gives you an aspiration. It gives you a dream. It gives you a reason to keep going. Hope is a big thing. So that's a neat element of fostering that I had not even considered. You dabbled in this next question a little bit, but I'll give you another opportunity to elaborate on it. The reason why you started. What was it that was truly your why? That, I know you talked about seeing it firsthand in your in-laws' home, but everything put together, what was ultimately the why as to you and your wife making the decision, we're going to do this. We're going to get into foster care.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So seeing it firsthand, right, and seeing there's a need, but the real conviction for me came in the book of James. James is applied Christianity. Right. James is the real life applying your faith. That is what the book of James is. And in James chapter 1, verse 27, see to or visit the widows and the orphans. And that's what, King James and some of the other translations will frame it. And I love the way that the Amplified frames it, which is more of the sort of the word for word translations. It says, see to the widows and the orphans and help them. And it was a conviction for me to say, look, if you are who you say you are and you really believe in who God is, take my word and apply it. And so for me, it was, and my wife before me, but for me, it was that conviction, seeing that, saying, hey, this is something that's tangible. This is something that I can absolutely do today. And I love children. I love kids. My 3 kids at that time, they were, my life. And there were so many, at that time, the need to have that love extended to other children was just, it was rampant. I mean, and it's still today. My understanding, we've not been in the foster system for a while, but the need's still there.
Sure.
And so, for me, it was seeing the need coupled with this conviction from the Lord, reading James and saying, it doesn't get any more concrete and black and white than that.
Yeah.
For me, and other folks have other convictions and that are absolutely just as valid and convicting. But for me, this was something that we saw the way that I was raised, the way my wife was raised, and seeing it in front of us. That's what really got me into this day one.
Yeah. Well, as you pointed out, when it talks about seeing to and helping the widows and the orphans, it's prefaced by, this is what true and pure religion looks like.
That's right. Undefiled religion. I should have stressed that. That's exactly right.
This is what it looks like. If you're going to live it out,
absolutely,
this is how you can do it.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
It really just, for those of us who do ascribe to the Christian faith, it does kind of hit you right in the face and say, hey, buddy,
here's a brick.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So, it's a pretty good. That's a pretty good why. I would say that is a pretty good why.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to bring up one of my objections, one of my hurdles that I would have going into fostering, and that is, how do you go into it knowing that there's a chance and possibly even a likelihood? Just based off what the numbers you gave me potentially 15 that you fostered, and 2 of them is what you've adopted out of the fostering process. So going into that, how do you prepare yourself, or what's the mentality that you have to have, knowing that the children you bring into your home, that you welcome into your home, you make the commitment to love them as your own, but there's this really good chance that they'll have to exit your life?
Yeah.
How do you overcome that?
You don't. I'm just going to be honest with you. It is something that nags at you. It is hard, but it's really I mean, honestly, it's a Matthew 28. It's the sheep and the goats. And I say that by when Christ defined, when I was naked, you clothed me. When I was hungry, you fed me. And I think that mindset, coupled with that James applied faith, you think about there's an individual, there's a human being in need, and you're bringing them into the warmth and out from the dark, cold, whatever environment they're in, and you bring them into the warmth, and you love on them, and you say their life is better. Life is better than this. God loves you, and we're going to show you what this home looks like. And you know it with this missionary approach to each child that comes in your home. I think that helps, but you never get over it. You always get a little attached to one, and some of them more than others. And sorry,
you're okay.
We had one that was in our home not too long ago, before Keegan, and man, we loved that little guy, but there was a great aunt and uncle up in Washington that really wanted him too, and that's the right answer. I mean, they'll tell you the system will say that's the right answer. You reunite them with biological family. Now, I personally sort of disagree with that, because we're kind of proving that wrong.
Sure.
Because family is family. Family doesn't matter blood, how you relate it, but that's sort of the state mentality is let's reunite them. And they were great people. They were super loving, and we got one little about a year after he left, we got a little video of him crawling for the first time. But man, we were when they came and picked him up and drove away, it was hard. It was hard on all of us, but we came together and we prayed and we said, this is what you want, God. This is your will. And we have to understand that. Just like anything else in your life, anything else that you do, that you have to just understand that there's a bigger purpose and a bigger cause behind what you do. And you have to subordinate yourself and your feelings and your attachments. Just like John said, I have to decrease so he can increase. And that's exactly what we do, is you have to subordinate your feelings and your attachments and sentiments and say, there's a reason why this little guy wasn't meant to be in our home, but meant to be in these two folks' home up in Washington. There's a reason for that. Is it easy? Nope, it's not. Is it? Does it get easier with each one? Nope, it doesn't. It's hard, but we wouldn't be human beings with.
Sure.
That's what differentiates us from the other animals. Is you wouldn't be human beings if you didn't have that reaction.
That's right. Wow. So it doesn't get easy. It doesn't. There's really no mental preparation going into it, other than realizing that you're doing something for a bigger purpose.
Mm-hmm. That's my personal. Yes.
Sure.
That's how I get. And I resolve it, and I understand it. Yes, that's to me. It's again, they're beautiful when they come into your home, and you're scooping them up, and you're pulling them close. You're saying, "I'm going to protect you. I'm going to keep you from whatever you just went through." And you pray with everything you've got. You pray that when you release them, that God has protected them.
Sure.
But at a bare minimum, like I said, they walk away knowing that. There is sanity out there. There is, I mean, relatively speaking, of course, but but anyway, yeah, that's right.
That's awesome. That's an incredible answer. Okay, we'll move on to the next question here. Let me ask, and you've kind of already addressed this a little bit, but you can dabble in more. So you foster to adopt. The adoption is finalized. Is there ever any challenge blending the two together? So those that you fostered to adopt, and you've got two to use for this answer, but was there ever any conflict? Was there ever anything out of the norm, I guess, in trying to blend biological with those adopted?
Oh, I see. At first when I got into this, I thought there would be, to be honest with you. I thought that there would be this, I've got to act one way and do certain things and treat certain individuals a certain way, because there is, when I first got into this, I perceived this to be a difference, but as I did it and as we got into it, there's not. It's the same treatment. It's the same. I mean, I'll be honest. Sometimes I forget.
Yeah.
Sometimes I forget. But no, I think initially there was. I'll be honest. Of how would I respond? And questions too. One of the questions we asked ourselves was, when do you tell the child? Because we fostered and adopted children that were very, very young, like 3 weeks and younger.
Gotcha.
So that was kind of our, when we were fostering, we said, look, state agency, we want like nothing older than 6 months. Now we did foster older children, but we realized there was believe it or not, there's a bigger need for newborns and infants.
Okay.
For foster and adopt services, and that's my wife's. It's just that's her thing, but when you're asking yourselves the question, how do you communicate that? So my oldest adoptive daughter, Brinley, we asked ourselves that questions like, when do you tell her? What do we say to her? How do we? Because I had a cousin that was adopted, and I had some friends that were adopted, and I reached out to them as we were getting into this. Said, hey, did your parents tell you when you were adopted? Did they say anything to you? Did you know? And the ones that said their parents didn't tell them felt betrayed when they found out, felt lied to. And the ones that said their parents always told them, they knew it, felt like there was a trust factor there. And I remember one guy telling me one time, you do these circles, like when you're in my company and business over the years, you do these little sort of, tell us something neat about yourself kind of thing. And mine's always the kids, right?
Yeah.
Always, certainly the number of kids.
Sure.
Definitely a conversation starter.
Right.
But one of the, when I was working at a CPA firm and we were doing an offsite, and one of the guys that was leading the discussion, when I told myself about him, he came to me later after the session. He said, hey, I was adopted and I'm interested in your story. And we just got to talking, and I asked him that same question. I said, well, did you know? Did your parents tell you? He said, yeah, that they did. And I felt like they trusted me with that information. And later in life, he did have an urging to meet his biological parents, which is, again, I'll be honest, that's a scary moment in
Sure.
adoptive parents' lives. Like, okay, because you go into this protecting them, and you don't want them to get hurt, right? In any way. He took it to the point where he reached out and got the information of who his parents were, biological parents were, and he kept the information. He thought about it over the weekend. He talked to his wife about it. And he goes, and at the end of the day, he said, I threw it away. I said, that's my family. Those are my parents. Those are the ones that raised me. Those are the ones that were there at the ball games. Those were the ones that came to the first day of school. Those are the ones that's my family. And it just gave me an assurance and a comfort level saying, hey,
Sure.
it's out there. And having witnessed my cousin when, and what he went through, and what my aunt and uncle went through when they communicated to him that he was adopted. And that came out by mistake. It wasn't even deliberate there either. And look, my aunt and uncle, very loving, beautiful people, doing everything they can to protect this little guy, and felt like that was the best decision at the time, and just to protect him. And but I know that he felt there was a period of time where there was a strain, and he had to come overcome that sense of something he didn't know about his life, And anyway, I'm starting to digress, but we decided early on, when you're thinking about that decision, like where's the conflict and where's the decision points, and you think about what you do and say, we decided to let our children know that any child that we adopted, we were going to be very open and upfront. Didn't want them to not know something. Now, that doesn't mean we don't protect them and keep them away from all that as much as we can. We absolutely do, because there's certain things you do where you keep their identity hidden, so that it's some parents that try to reach out, and we've heard of like the internet, people reaching out trying to search that way. But anyway, we decided to tell them, and beyond that, honestly, Anthony, I can tell you that outside of that, everything else is just normal. It's like whatever the first three and how we acted and how we talked and how we did is the exact same way we did the other three. Now, look, I don't have a parent's manual out there, and I don't know of one that's out there that exists.
There's not.
So I don't know what the right answer is.
It's wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know what the right answer is. I just know that the way that we parented the first three is the same way we parented the second three. So and it seems to work. It's more about each individual child's character differences and personality differences than it is about adoption versus non-adoption.
Sure. I think that's really neat because I know one of my objections, and I talked about this in an interview a couple of weeks ago. One of my hurdles for adoption is, I know that my kids are mine, and I can see my kids, and I can see how well they have turned out. And the fact that I had anything to do with that is kind of a miracle. Yeah. Because, I know me.
That's right.
That's the scary part.
Exactly.
And then they turn out and they're just, fantastic, and they're all unique in their own way. But trying to overcome that fact of, this one's potentially not mine biologically.
Right.
Maybe I won't see any of myself in them. And so for me, it's, if we're still physically able to have more kids, why would we not just have more kids rather than choosing the course of adoption?
Sure.
Just because they've all turned out so well. That's one of the hurdles that I have. But I think that's neat hearing your perspective, though, because obviously you've done this a lot.
Yeah.
You're probably an expert in this field technically, as much as you've done it. But you say an interesting thing there that I actually had did some personal study on, and that's the how these kids will turn out. And sometimes our minds attach this sort of innate, sort of what's in their DNA mindset that hey, I don't know how they're going to turn out. I don't know what they're going to do. To your point. Yeah.
What's interesting is several books, but there's studies out there that state that the environment in which you're raised in, the environment in which you have, is probably, I think for years people thought, well, it's just who they are. It's in their gene pool. It's in their DNA. But the environment they're finding is probably equally, or if not more, impactful to the child than it is how, what's in their system, so to speak.
Sure.
What's in their DNA and genetics. And I see that today. I mean, I really do. It's hard to step back and say, well, because of X, Y, and Z, that's why, Riley and Keegan and Brenley are the way they are, because we don't have a control group to see what they would be like in the situation. But you can see certainly common elements and expressions and thought processes that are very aligned with how they were raised and that sort of thing, because other children in the family have said that. But
sure.
But yeah, because that was something that you mentioned that, and it I thought about that too. Is like, how do you know? And there's a questions about legitimate questions about knowing the health history of the child. All of that, that is absolutely a valid concern and question, because you want to prepare for anything that does pass down, genetically, that kind of thing. But certainly the behavior and how they act and how they are is, again, I would say, the environment is probably more impactful, and how they're raised, and the home is probably more influencing than. I'm not a scientist and I don't claim to be one, but I certainly have read enough studies to show, because of that, a large part because of that question, to know that there's a lot out there. There's a huge body of work that says that the environment is probably more influencing than what's in the gene pool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I have a feeling that I'm going to get through, because I've got some other interviews on the topic of adoption coming up. I have this feeling in the back of my mind that it's probably something that we might end up doing by the time I get done with all of this.
Well, hey, I'm going to tell you, if I can convince you, I will convince you. It is definitely something that all folks should consider, for sure.
Well, I know my wife's going to be glad to hear that. I think I might have shared this in the last interview on, adoption, but I won't go through all three of them. Our first two were over 9 pounds, and then the third one was 11.1. So my wife's on board for adoption, let me tell you.
Body can't handle it anymore. Stop it.
Can't push out a second grader.
That's right.
So anyway, she's going to be mad I said that. All right, so next question. Let me talk to you about this because we go to church together, and I've seen the way that your kids help and your kids act, and they're involved in what you're doing when you foster new children. What kind of an impact? Because you see it in the home. So what kind of an impact has this lifestyle of fostering and adopting? What has it had on your kids?
That's a good question, and I'll tell you. When we do have discussion, now this is Papa Farris talking. I don't like to my daughters to come to me and tell me their marriage and all that stuff. I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. Just wait till you're about 35 and then we'll have that discussion. But when we have legitimate discussions about what they want in their family, the first thing that's come up is, I don't know if I want kids. I want to adopt. So every single one of them that is certainly old enough to make a decision to even think about it in these terms, every one of them have said adoption's in their future, fostering's in their future. And I think, to me and Kayla, I think that has been an amazing result.
Sure.
To have my kids come to us and say, this is something that we're going to carry on the legacy, carry on the extension of what, Granny and Papa have done, what you and Mom have done, and what we're going to continue doing. And I think that's, if anything, that's a win because of the need that's out there, and
sure,
and the impact it has on kids. And we try to teach our kids the right things. We try to teach our kids the valid stuff. We're not always perfect. We're not always successful, but
nobody is.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the fact that they came to us and when we've talked about this topic, and they've that's not even thinking, just sort of just almost a visceral response, like we're going to adopt. I mean, it's not a question. It's just a matter of when,
Right.
And I think that's awesome. So I think that they have learned a lot in this process. I mean, they're still encouraging Mom and Dad, hey, go get another one. We want another. I'm like, okay, slow down. We're getting into advanced years. We want to see grandchildren eventually. But no, I think the impact on them has been nothing but positive, nothing but favorable. So
that's awesome. Well, it's a very neat concept and idea of continuing on that legacy. Not that it just stems from you or from their grandparents, but it reaches back to the why you gave earlier of, this is what true and pure Christianity is. This is what religion looks like.
Yeah.
Doing this.
That's right. That's right.
To continue to live that out when, as you said, there is a great need for it. That's I'd imagine that's a pretty cool response to see in your children.
Oh, it is. It is. It's like, we're like, yes, we did something right.
Yeah, that's all we need as parents and dads, is that one win.
I know.
We can
it's like
hang
that
on
one shot in golf. You get one good hit, and you're like, okay, that's all I'm doing.
This is the story I'm going to tell everybody.
That's
One time this happened.
That's right.
So let me ask you this question. I know you've mentioned that it's something that every family should consider with the adoption route. Let's narrow it down to fostering.
Mm-hmm.
How would a family recognize if they're suitable to do that? Do you think that there are some qualifiers to that? That's okay. Do you think there's maybe some qualifiers to that, as in, do we need some sort of mental preparation for what we're going to do? Do we need particular financial preparation? Does our home need to look a certain way? Do we need kids before we do this, or should we just welcome them in with no other kids?
Mm-hmm.
What parameters or suggestions would you give to a family who's considering fostering?
Yeah. Good question. So when you and your wife sat down and decided to have a child, what were some of the decisions you guys made?
Honestly, I don't really know, other than, hey, we're going to have a kid.
But my point is it's the same decision point, right? So when there are some things you nailed it. Mentally preparing yourself for the fostering route versus adoptive route. And that's what we talked about earlier is knowing that this is temporary. It's not something that's absolutely something you have to prepare for. I don't know if there's a good way to prepare for that. You just sort of telling yourself that this is something that kind of comes in and out of your life and being prepared for that. But the decision overall to care for a child, to raise a child, whether it's a week of raising or it's 6 months of raising or 2 years of raising, that decision is the same. And I think when you're ready mentally, just like you would when you're ready mentally to have a child, biological child, when you're ready financially, that's super important. Making sure, those decisions are done in a good financial context. But the most important thing to me, in my mind, is spiritually. Are you ready for this? Is this something that you believe in? Is this something that you feel like you're aligned with Scripture and aligned with what God wants for you? I think those three components, physically, or mentally, financially, and spiritually, I think those are the three that you think about when you go through kind of if you were to do sort of this proverbial checklist and say, yeah, I got that. I'm ready. I got that. I mean, it's not that easy, but certainly, those components I think are important to sit down, and especially when you're married and you and your wife can sit down and really talk about this and say, we have to be prepared. We have to support and be prepared for, bringing children into our home that sometimes they don't look like us. They don't talk like us. They come from a completely different background than what we're used to. And it depends on the age, right? So we fostered, like I said, they're very young, but we also fostered some children that were 5 and 6 years old and that kind of thing. And we got to see kind of a mix of differences. But to answer your question, I don't know if you can just be perfectly prepared for it.
Sure.
Because the unknown.
You can't really be perfectly prepared for biological children either.
Exactly. Exactly right. Exactly right. But honestly, Anthony, I mean, the same decision points, the same way we approach the biological children is the exact same way we approach the foster and adoptive children.
Okay. I'm going to give you an opportunity because you mentioned it earlier and you said you'd be happy to share it. So, bonus content here. The adoption that you had, that you said was kind of a miracle.
Yeah.
You should tell us that.
Absolutely. Well, all of them are miracles in one way or another.
Sure.
For sure. But this one was unique. It was Riley, our second to last child, second to youngest child. We were not foster parents at the time. We weren't licensed. We had taken a break from Brindley, 4 children, grew up, or wanted to take some time to get them, just settled and starting school and things like that. And we decided when she was 6 that we would, hey, let's open our home up again. Let's do this again. And we were. It's interesting. We started the paperwork, to get our license back out there, and we went on vacation one weekend up in Arkansas. And when we got home, I mean, it was that night. Actually, it was the next morning. It was early the next morning. We just pulled in really late and parked our camper and went inside and went to bed and woke up and we got a phone call from a friend of ours that was a nurse in one of the area hospitals. And she said, hey, I know you guys aren't registered. I know you guys aren't licensed. I know you guys aren't. But hey, there is a woman that came in the hospital and gave birth to a child. And she doesn't want the child. She just doesn't want it. She's not talking to anybody. She just doesn't want the child. And she said, look, I'm going to get in trouble doing this. I'll just tell you up front. But before we call CPS, I wanted to see if you guys would be interested in the child. Without hesitation, yes. And we took our kids to some friends and dropped them off to babysit. And we drove over to the hospital and they brought us in there and introduced us to the mother, and we sat down, and for 3 hours, we just sat there and told her our life story. Told her, we brought pictures of our children, brought pictures of our home, and we just said, look, this is something we believe in. This is something we love. We love children. We love to help. We want to help. And it was interesting because she just sat there and listened, didn't ask any questions really, just sat there and listened to us. And we got through, and we looked up, and she said, I want the child to go to you. I want the baby to go, because she's, parental rights and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so she signed paperwork that basically stated that we could have guardianship over the baby. Well, we got to name the baby. We got the name of Riley. Our names are on the original birth certificate because she had delegated that over. But we just had guardianship rights at that point. And she said, well, listen, I'm going to go out of town to Houston. Be back in about a week or so, and I'll sign the final paperwork that gives you full, waive my parents' rights and everything. So we took her home, and we were loving on her and just praying that this all, and that's the scary moment. This is not done through any state agency. It's not. It's just two people coming together and saying, completely outside the state. And of course, we had a foster attorney that we used when we were in as foster parents to adopt, and we pulled her in to get her involved and say, hey, you just want to make sure that the paperwork's legit and we're not doing something that we shouldn't be doing and things. And so she was there. She says, no, just this is the form, this is the paperwork, this is all the stuff that she needs to fill out. So when she gets back in town, have her fill that out. We didn't hear from the lady. We didn't hear from her the next week. Didn't hear from the second week. It was about the third or fourth week Kayla got a phone call, and I was at work, and the mother was back in town, and she said, hey, I want to see the baby. Or no, she goes, hey, I'm ready to sign the papers. But hey, can you bring the child? And before, she didn't want to see her at that time. Now she wants to see her, and my wife just freaks, flips out. She calls me in tears. I know this is the right thing to do. I know we're supposed to do this, but now she wants to see the child. John, we're going to have to. I said, just wait. Let's just see how this plays out and see where this goes. And they met at a location that was, I think, at a bank, because they needed a notary to sign the paperwork. So Kayla had a friend of ours go with her, and she brought the other children just in case there was a goodbye. And we were just kind of fingers crossed and praying that. And Kayla showed up, and the mother said she was there waiting on us, and or Kayla, and Kayla said, "Do you want to see the child? Are you ready?" She goes, "No, let me sign the paperwork first." So she signed all the paperwork, and she was good with it. And then she saw Riley, and I mean, to me, that whole process, going through that, getting everything signed over in that 4-week period, to us showing up at the McKinney courthouse for the adoption day, and the judge standing up and having all the kids come back behind the desk and type in the adoption order, which that's a whole nother topic we should talk about as far as going into the courthouse and waiting in line for your adoption hearing, and the stuff that goes in front of that's pretty sad. Wow. in our society. But that whole process, when you walk in there for something like that, the entire courtroom just lights up, and everybody it's almost surreal moment, because everything stops and everybody just like, finally this is a good thing happening, and you see that. But anyway,
that's cool.
So the whole thing, the way that it all worked, the way that it played out, I mean, this never happens this way. It never happens. So it was a complete and total God thing for sure.
Sure.
But it was a miracle, because typically, and again, we saw this with the other two, is there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of hearings, there's a lot of parents or not parents, but family that could potentially getting involved. And so you have a little bit of that going through it. But this was completely just 100% all the way through, and all the way to adoption a year later, and officially adoption. And so that whole process, without having been licensed and seeking it out, to adopt, it just happened. And That's why when you think about, Caitlin, Ashton, or Avery, God gave them to us, just like this gave Riley and Brinley and Keegan to us, just a different medium. They came to us, but all of them were given to us to take care of. So that one was unique though, because it was just, completely outside of the system, completely outside of the normal process. And it just happened. It just happened. So, seamlessly and without hitches and things you kind of run into sometimes. So anyway,
I think it's really cool though, and that it speaks a lot about you and your wife, how you did it as much as you did it, and you're still. Are you still licensed now?
No.
Okay. No. All right. You think you're calling it quits?
I mean, it's okay. I'm ready for grandkids now. Yeah, so I think
you've done a lot.
I think we're done.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, but I just think it's really neat that in doing it as long as you did it, you made such an impact to where nurses and other people knew about you, knew to call you.
Yeah. That's true.
That says a lot.
Yeah, that was good.
We need more people like you out there. That's awesome. Let's leave it with this. Let's wrap it up with this right here. So you've had a lot of kids in your home. You still technically have a lot of kids in your home. What's one thing that you'd like to leave dads with? Just a tip, information, recommendation. Here's one thing you really need to know, whatever it might be.
Man, this is where I say something really earth-shattering. And I don't have anything really earth-shattering to say other than I think the biggest thing for me is just being open with your kids. And one thing that I'll tell you that I think has probably been the most successful for me and Kayla coming together and is that's being consistent with your children. Consistency. So when you lay it out, you lay a rule out, or you lay a decision point they make, and you say, okay, all right, this you're deciding this. You're going to have to live with it. Being consistent. Just stay consistent. Support each other. Mm-hmm. But kids need a dad. They need a dad. They need a mom, no doubt.
Right.
Absolutely. But they need a dad. They need a dad role, a dad figure. It is so important to be a dad because they need someone they can talk to have a perspective. But honestly, it's someone they know they're safe and protected. So I don't think I have a great sort of one-liner answer for you other than just what I...
There's not one. That's why I asked. I'm just trying to...
Yeah, but I would say probably consistency has probably been the biggest thing. If someone were to ask, like, how what's one teaching principle for your children? I think being consistent, just being consistent with what you do and what you lay out for your children, just sticking to that and being consistent with it.
Yeah, that's good. I know that's a struggle point for a lot of people who have multiple kids because, baby number 3 or baby number 4, they don't have to do what baby number 1 and number 2 did, right?
That's exactly right. Completely different. That's right.
Yeah, you're the 4th one. We're tired of kids. You can do whatever you want.
and I can't say that hasn't happened with us either, but yeah, that's exactly right.
But the mindfulness of consistency is it's definitely a neat, a necessary component.
And know they're watching you like a hawk,
yeah.
too. I mean, they watch everything you do, too. So, yeah, if you be mindful of that as well.
But. That's awesome. I'm going to wrap up with one question that I meant to ask you. Mm-hmm. So, when you made the decision to tell your children that they were adopted, what age did you resolve on? Was there a particular point?
No, we pretty much started very early. Now, 2 of my children, it's pretty clear, but with Brinley, I think we told her from day one that actually I think what helped was my wife used to do life books, okay. And so they would do pictures and storylines and things like that. And we started by telling her, when you first came into our home when we were fostering, we just pretty much when she was old enough to comprehend, we didn't tell her when she was like 5, but we told her maybe it was about that time. But earlier than that, we wanted her to develop and be able to process it. But man, I don't remember the exact time we sort of. It's almost been like just a part of who we are, and looking at pictures and things like that with her, and her being very cognizant of early on of how she came into the family, that sort of thing. But yeah, I just think it's just like any other thing that's kind of a heavy life point to make with your children when they're old enough to understand it. But you're open, and I think that's the other thing too is just being open with your children when they have questions. You don't try to hide anything. You just, hey, this is how it happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting because I mean I remember first maybe second grade she was telling kids in her class, yeah, I'm adopted, and kids were like, no, you're not. Like, yeah, I am, and I came into my mom and dad's house and. It's just something she accepted and didn't struggle with it. So
that's really neat because it's usually not that way.
No, and again, that's a good point because, and again, I think it's the lack of openness is probably why there's this sort of bitterness or this feeling of betrayal that I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm. I had a friend who was in that situation.
Is that right?
Yeah, and he always suspected it, but his mother would never tell him, and then he found out, and then he was mad.
Yeah, no, and look, I believe the parents' motives were good. And it's hard for someone that realizes that what they've always known their entire life is not.
Sure.
Absolutely. That's a tough one to struggle with. So I think just being open with your kid just provides another sense of trust and, hey, I know they're being honest with me. There's no lie. There's nothing there that I don't know kind of thing. So it's just the openness I think is important.
Gotcha. Well, John, this has been a fantastic interview. I think you've not only helped those of us who are maybe on the fence about fostering or adoption, but you've also contributed some things that are helpful to people who do have adopted children who are maybe wrestling with the question of, well, do I tell them?
Yeah.
When do I tell them? I think that's a huge component. This has been a great interview.
That's good. If I can get more people involved and more people engaged and I'm a big cheerleader for it. So that's great. I hope, and I'm absolutely happy to entertain questions or anything that follows up from this. I'm a big proponent of it. So
well, you send them to me, and I'll send them to him.
Absolutely,
awesome.
Absolutely,
awesome. Well, thank you again for your time.
Yeah, thank you,
and
for having me.
Thanks for living the way that you've lived, and then sharing that story.
Yeah, no problem.
Great example.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, thank you for everyone who has watched and listened today. This is Fathering Our Future, the podcast for dads. I'm Anthony Vandegrift, and I hope you'll join me next time. Hey, thanks for watching today's episode. I hope it has blessed you and challenged you to strive to be a better dad every day. And if you'd like more great content like this, just subscribe to the channel. Also, if you think dads are valuable and essential to the family, consider supporting this effort. Just go to fatheringourfuture.com and click support. Every contribution helps, and it's greatly appreciated. Thank you for being a part of Fathering Our Future.